Hi, this is John Wren. I am the host of the Startup Show here each Friday at noon. We talk about startup. If you're starting a new career, a new project, a new campaign, or a new business, we think we can be helpful to you. Tune in wherever you're watching now. If maybe a friend has sent this along to you. If you're watching live on YouTube Live, that's great. You can also get it on a link on our smallbizchamber.org website, or we put it out on Twitter. There's a number of different ways you can connect. If you can't watch live, do the next best thing, and that's watch the recording at the same link.
It's 12 o'clock.
And it's 12 o'clock now, the computer's telling us, so we'll go ahead and get started. The Startup Show has been sputtering along for years now. YouTube is fantastic. I just did the Hangout. It worked perfectly. I worked perfectly. I think it's been user error, but I think they've done some things to improve it too. I mean, YouTube is wonderful to provide this service, and we're certainly going to be here. We've got a site on YouTube that we'll start promoting now that I can actually get this up and running. Now, each Friday at 2 p.m., so noon Mountain Time for the Startup Show. Then at 2 p.m., we have the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop. And for the first time, we're going to be at the Lodo Tattered Cover. Now, this will be in the coffee shop area. You can come get a cup of coffee or have lunch right there at the Tattered Cover. I'll be there. We'll get started with the formal part of the meeting at 2 o'clock, and what we try to do is make this weekend your startup weekend. Now, you don't have to start up this weekend, but if you want to come and just sort of get a sense of what we're doing, that's fine. But what we want to eventually do is have people coming that want to start a new business that weekend, and we help you get a good start on the weekend at the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop. That's at 2 o'clock, Lodo Tattered Cover. It's right on the 16th Street Mall. The best way to get there is take the light rail to Union Station, then the free trolley to the Tattered Cover. You can't miss it. It's just about a minute from Union Station. And it's very good. Now, if you come in from out of town, you can stay at Union Station and then take the trolley up, go to our meeting, and then go back home and be our ambassador with your local chamber and try to help them get a similar group started wherever you're at. 5280 Magazine has said that we've infused Denver with an entrepreneurial spirit. Now we're trying to reach out and help other places across the country do the same thing. Now, we have what we think is I say it's unique. To be put into a method like this is unique, but I think it's how most businesses actually get started. We have the Small Business Chamber Startup Method. It starts with recovery. Most people have to get back up on their feet. I think startups, for the most part, it's a little bit like being a boxer. They say the best boxers come out of the gutter. They don't box because it's going to be this fulfilling thing to kind of top off their wonderful experience in the Ivy League and so forth. They come from fairly rough backgrounds, and I think successful entrepreneurs do the same thing. That's why these programs at the University of Denver and all across the country that have been cooked up to appeal to the the upper 1% aren't producing many startups. Some successful startups are taking their money and offering kids coming out of high school money for skipping college. It's despicable what's happened. But our startup method usually is recovery, get back up on your feet, and there's different ways to do that. That's not really what we do. You sort of have to do that on your own. But once you're back up on your feet, the outward and visible sign of that would be that you would watch this show and then come this afternoon at 2 o'clock to the Lodo Tattered Cover. And if you can't do it this Friday, maybe next Friday. And we're going to be doing that each Friday. And once you're back up on your feet, you can come to the meeting. The imagination is the next practice. There are practices that get better, and recovery is a practice. It's not like you recover, get back up on your feet, and you don't have to worry about it. I mean, recovery comes first, last, and always, and that's something that we all have. Now, there are various ways to recover, and you will have found your own, or if you haven't you can ask people at the Idea Cafe what they're doing. But that's not the purpose of the meeting. It's not a recovery meeting. There are a lot of other places you can go for that kind of help. But once you've recovered, got back up on your feet, what's next? And some people stall out at that point. They have recovered, they've gotten back up on their feet, and they just never quite reconnect with life. And the next practice is imagine, and that's what we do help you with at the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop. Fire your imagination, and there are other ways to do it. Now, the Idea Cafe is not intended to be something you go to every week. You come to it, have a startup weekend, and then you're started, and hopefully by the next Friday, you're too busy to come back. Now, if you're not too busy to come back, we welcome you back. It's not that we don't allow you to come back. And once you've started your business and are successful, we hope for sure you'll come back and share your experience. Been doing these startup workshops for over 20 years. And so I do have people that come and help do the brainstorming. Now, a lot of times their ideas are the very, very best. They've been through startup. Whoever it is can put something on the table. And we use a startup method that's like brainstorming on steroids. It's called a fresh thought hunt. And if you don't know what a fresh thought hunt is, you definitely ought to come. If you're a consultant, you don't know what a fresh thought hunt is, come, incorporate it into your practice. You're going to find it very helpful for your clients. And that would be a new project. Taking the fresh thought hunt into your community would be a project. And we are for people who are not just starting new businesses, but starting a new career. Sometimes the best way to get a new business started is to get a job in the direction of your dreams. So it's for people starting a new career, a new project, a new campaign, or a new business. And the first practice in our startup method is recovery, then imagine. That's where the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop comes in. And then think. And we think that a good exercise for thinking is Socrates Cafe. Chris Phillips wrote a book called Socrates Cafe. It inspired some of us here in Denver to start one, and we've been meeting ever since. And we've got 3 different groups that we know about in Denver. Others, I think, have spun off, and that's great. The more the merrier. And there is a Socrates Cafe each Friday evening at Panera Bread. Panera Bread at Lodo, so it's just up the street from the Tattered Cover. And the Socrates Cafe generally gets started about 6 o'clock. A lot of us show up and eat about 5:30, and 6 o'clock we start the meeting and choose a topic, share our thoughts, ask each other questions. It's very simple and it's fun. You can come and just observe if you want the first time or two, but it's a little bit addictive. Be careful because you may find it becoming a habit. And sometimes the best meeting is the meeting after the meeting. Some of us get together on the light rail back south to the various places, and on the light rail we continue the discussion. And if you aren't in Denver, you can probably find a Socrates Cafe today or tomorrow or over the weekend. If you just Google Socrates Cafe and your zip code, something should come up for you. But if you're in Denver, Lodo, Panera Bread, that's 16th and Market, starts at 6 o'clock. It's over at 7:30, so you got plenty of time to get down the street to the pavilions and take in a movie if you want. And there is also a Socrates Cafe each Saturday at the University of Denver. And we're not affiliated or associated with the University of Denver. I did go there. That's where this hat comes from. But we're not a University of Denver officially sanctioned group, but they know we're meeting. We've been meeting there for a couple of years now, and it's a great place. We're in current periodicals where the comfortable chairs are. It's free and open to everybody, as is the Socrates Cafe at Panera. And just show up. You don't have to RSVP. And we're going to be changing the focus of the Saturday night group to science. We're going to try to talk about science in a way that's useful for the average ordinary citizen, the common person. How do we think about science? And we're encouraging people to go on YouTube and look. I've got a little book I put together on Wikipedia. I'll show it to people at the group tomorrow. And come and share your thoughts about science and sharpen your thinking about science Saturday evening. And that is at 6:30. We're in the Anderson Academic Commons at DU, the old Penrose Library. And let's see what else is going on. It's all that comes to mind right now. But if you want to start something new, the deck is stacked against you in today's society. The worst offender, in my opinion, is the Small Business Administration. And if you've gone into the SBA and have had a good experience, I hope you'll call me, because I have never talked to a person that's actually been helped by them as they're starting a new business. Now, I think disaster relief, maybe helping a business that's established find some financing, I think they maybe do serve a certain role in that, but they offer these startup workshops that are just not at all the way businesses actually get started. How do businesses start? They do pretty much these practices of recovery, imagine, think, and then learn. Now, learn is best done, it's our orientation, it's best done not in the academic environment. I think the academic environment is wonderful. I'm all for it. I don't fight academia at all. But for most of us, that may not be the best way to learn as we're starting a new business. Some people think the best adult learning project is to start a new business. And it's hard to get involved in that and not have some sort of a peer group that you meet with on a regular basis that's doing the same thing pretty much. Not the same business that you're in, but starting a business. Startup is the common denominator. And we try to be the catalyst for people joining together in something patterned after what Ben Franklin did back in 1727 with a group of his friends. Ben Franklin was 21 years old. He'd just come back from England. He was kind of tricked into going over there. He had the latest information on the new printing technology that was catching on in London. So he knew some things about printing, but he didn't come right back and raise money and start a business. Almost no one does that. You know, think that somebody that's never been a business owner or a manager can just raise money and start a business. They're misleading these kids in college. They make them think they can do that, and it almost never works. Ben Franklin didn't do that. He came back from London with these ideas, but he went to work for a printer. And the other thing he did is he started a group that met every Friday night, what he called his more ingenious colleagues, and they gathered, and it was a self-directed learning group. And they developed a format, and we try to be the catalyst for helping other people do that same thing. So if you come to the Idea Cafe, we'll give you more information about that and some suggestions on starting. And from time to time, we start a new group. We get involved in it heavily. What we're really looking for are people that will come, stay at the Union Station Hotel, visit our meetings on Friday, and maybe Saturday, stick around for the Idea Cafe if you want, and then head back home and do it with your local Chamber of Commerce. We think if we can get enough people doing this, we can have a dramatic impact on the economy in this country. You know, it used to be that business had this quality to it. My dad was the prototypical entrepreneur from the past. He started as if it were 1912. You know, in 1912, Harvard started offering an MBA designed for middle managers, and now we're trying to impose that same kind of thinking on people that want to start a new business. What has the result been? The result has been that well, just this week it was announced there's about half the public corporations that used to be. When you don't have the minnows, eventually you don't have the whales. We don't have small businesses. Startup has fallen way off. And sometimes, you know, if you take a hard look at the numbers, what they're calling a small business really isn't. Me sitting in my bathroom at my kitchen table is not really a small business. Now, I'm hoping that the Small Business Chamber grows and is eventually a true business, but I haven't really started. This is kind of a labor of love. It's been sweat of my brow. You know, I've gotten some people to help me, but it's really been no money in, no money out. And we're trying to think of a way now that we can spread what we're doing so that we do sort of a last gasp help of the entire country and the whole thing goes away. Maybe that's the best thing that could happen. Or we'll be forming a board of directors and trying to formalize things and get money involved one way or another, charging for some of the things that I've been giving away free for over 20 years now. You know, what I talk about as a result of to a certain extent what I learned at graduate business school. I do have a foundation of understanding business. I've been a consultant on my own for CPA firms, for the largest consulting firm devoted exclusively to small business. I've had great experience. I grew up in a small business. My dad, I was with him from his first sale to the sale of the business over a 20-year period. And I saw it grow. I saw what he was doing. And every night at the dinner table, we sort of had a business seminar. And I've worked for outdoor sports industries. One of the things I'm really hoping to do is we spread this idea of startups are a little bit different. I think that's also true inside large organizations. And you can get inside a large organization and see how things start. And there was a clarity of this when Tom Peters and what was his co-author's name, but they wrote a book called Thriving on Chaos. And they said that what happened in most large corporations is there was an allowance for skunk works. Skunk work is where someone would get off to the side, maybe with another employer or two, and they'd start something that their boss would never approve. And it catches on and becomes one of their new products. We've lost the sense of that. And one of the ways to restore it, I think, was something I discovered when I was in graduate business school. This was maybe the most valuable part of the couple of years I spent at the University of Denver, and that was being in the library, just browsing through the books and coming across this one, The Organizational Role of the Assistant To by Victor Phillips. And Victor Phillips was in the Air Force. He wrote a doctoral dissertation on the Assistant To position, inspired by President Eisenhower, who had the Commerce Secretary was the president of General Motors, and Eisenhower visited him, and they used this Assistant To position, as had Eisenhower in the military. They have a young lieutenant with a general, not to be second in command, but to learn from the general, not to do secretarial work, but to take on work that otherwise the general was has to do himself, special projects, attending meetings and speaking for the general, because he becomes ingrained with the generals. Meet once a week for breakfast is how I did it. I read this little book. Chancellor Mitchell asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, that's it. And he helped me find a job as Assistant To. It's sort of like getting hired as the boss's son. And we will be talking about this afternoon at the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop. Lodo, Denver, join us and find out about it, about Franklin Circles, and about how we're trying to take this across the country. If you're from out of town and you're just stumbling across this and you're in Denver this Friday afternoon or tomorrow, Saturday, for the Idea Cafe at 6:30, and this is all online. If you search for any of this on Google, it should come right up for you. We've been around long enough that we have a fairly good presence on Google. I'm not sure that what we have is the highest quality. It's homegrown, as you'll quickly see, and we're looking for a volunteer webmaster that will help us pull it all together so that we can be of more help to you. A startup, we say, our terminology is not nailed down quite yet. We say that we are practicing spiritual startup, and that's really true, but it's not any kind of a fundamentalist approach. You'll be comfortable whether you're an agnostic who knows if God exists, or if you are evangelical atheist, you'll be frustrated, because there is a very small percentage of the people that it's not just that they don't believe in God. That's fine. A lot of people don't, that's okay. But these people are like taking the gospel of atheism, good news of atheism as they see it. And to me, there's just no way to connect with people like that. Now, you only have to be willing to believe that there's something at work that's, Shakespeare believed that. What did he say in Hamlet? There is more to heaven and earth, Horatio. There is more to heaven and earth, Horatio, than is dreamed of in your philosophy. There is this realm, what you call it, synchronicity or coincidences. Some people say coincidences are just God's way of remaining anonymous, but any business that starts, any undertaking is usually very much aware of how these coincidences happen and give them a nudge. You can take that too far. One of my favorite books right now is One Simple Idea by Mitch Horowitz. One Simple Idea looks at taking positive thinking too far. It's a great history of where positive thinking movement came from. Mesmer back in France. Ben Franklin was on the panel to investigate Mesmer, and Franklin said, this is a bunch of hokum. And for Ben Franklin to say it was a bunch of hokum, it was a bunch of hokum, because that's what a lot of people accused Ben Franklin of. John Adams did not like Franklin at all. And he really wasn't a member of a church per se, but he did have faith. And he wrote about this after the revolution. And he said he had no doubt that there was something going on after the revolution, because there were so many times when just at the right moment something happened that it gave him the clear understanding that there was this sort of manifest destiny. He didn't use that term, but he really did talk about it, that there's something here. And because it was a total surprise what they started. Ben Franklin, one of the best biographies about him, is called The First American. And this is a teacher of history, a professor in Texas, I can't remember, Texas A&M, I think. And he writes in The First American about how there's a great passage of Franklin having the idea for the United States. In some way, he calls him, the title of the book is The First American, because at this moment that he describes, Franklin has the idea of the United States. And I think that's an example of how entrepreneurship actually works. Franklin had a lot of practice by that point. He had had the idea of having his own print shop. Then he had the first franchise in America. He franchised other print shops. He retired very early. He had the idea of electricity. Now, he didn't invent electricity, but he definitely discovered it. He was a member of the Royal Academy in England. He went over as a kid, a young kid. Then he went back, and he went back a couple of times. He became a member of the Royal Academy, which I had a predecessor that was at the first meeting of the Royal Academy. So Franklin had a lot of great ideas. He was not a member of a church, but you would have to say that he had a willingness and openness, and that's all that's required. You know, you can go too far with a doctrinaire faith. If we have people come in and it's just like their church or you're in trouble, then that doesn't work very well. And what we try to do is share what we have in common and not focus on our differences. You know, people of faith have a lot in common. And if we just get together and talk about why mine's better than yours, it doesn't go very far. But Bill and Bob, and there's others that have been involved in helping this understanding come about. And I had the Vatican representative to the Middle East answer a question of mine that really helped me decide what we're doing is on the right track. I said, with this approach that 12-step programs seem to have of a power greater than yourself, and you look for things that you have in common, could Christians and Muslims do that in the Middle East? And he thought, I guess I was just speaking about the Alcoholics Anonymous, but I wasn't. I asked him about 12-step programs, and he's thinking Alcoholics Anonymous. And he says, I think the 12 steps, the Alcoholics Anonymous, absolutely could get people to the table and looking for things that they have in common. But he said the problem is in the Middle East, they don't drink. Now, I'm not sure that's true, but that's what he said. And what we're trying to do is to take that same spirit into the secular world of business startup. And so if you're willing to believe in a power greater than yourself, I think you'd be very comfortable with the meeting this afternoon. And if we're off base in this, you'll do us a favor if you correct it now. As the twig is bent, so the tree grows. And the Small Business Chamber right now is pretty much just me and about 8,000 people across the country that I communicate with on a regular basis. And we think it can grow very quickly, and that it needs to grow very quickly. Because if we could get healthy small groups in every neighborhood across America, I think we could revolutionize the 2018 elections. Now, we won't revolutionize it by taking positions on candidates or issues, we'll revolutionize it by trying to help people learn with these self-directed learning groups based on what Ben Franklin did with his friends back in 1727. If they get together and have people on the left and on the right. Now, if there's a certain boundary, if these are fundamentalists, and it's like every Democrat is bad if you're a Republican is bad if you're a Democrat. These are both good people, and we need a dialogue to arrive at the truth. And so what we need is a healthy group in every neighborhood that helps people come together after each election. And if we can have that by 2018, and then we come together, I think a lot of good stuff would happen in those next 2 years, no matter who's president. And then when we come to 2020, for those elections, I think this country will be back on an even keel. It's not right now. And we think there's a certain urgency to try and reach out across the country and precipitate these healthy small groups like we've been doing here in Denver now for over 20 years. 5280 magazine says we've infused Denver with an entrepreneurial spirit. We'd like to help you do that with your community. Now, if you're watching this in Denver, come and participate, but also think about friends you have in other cities that might like to take this back to their local chamber of commerce, or if they hit a roadblock there, their local service club. We also think the local community newspapers will really get behind this. And so we're looking for our first 2 or 3 out-of-town groups to be starting right away. And so come visit us in Denver. You don't even have to say you were thinking about it. You can come in anonymously if you want, observe what we're doing, and then after the Idea Cafe, a startup workshop, 2 o'clock, tattered cover, come over to me and say, hey, I'd like to start one of these in St. Louis or wherever you're at. And we will give you some help doing that. Now, we're also looking for people that would like to be the helpers. And this are probably people I already know. If you've watched much of this, I think there's a good chance you and I are already friends. And I'm looking for a few good friends that I know well, that if we get somebody from St. Louis, you'd go out and help them start the first group. And if we have a team put together that's doing public speaking in Denver and across the country, going out and helping new groups start, we think we can have an impact on the 2018 elections. Now, we're doing this as an educational effort, not a political effort. We're not going to endorse candidates or issues, but we're just going to try to have a healthy small group in every neighborhood across America that will facilitate the process that we've had here in the United States, economically and politically for 230 plus years, and it's about to go away. So many people don't understand how capitalism really works. There's so much economic illiteracy. And yeah, we have a mixed economy in the United States. Capitalism can't do everything. As Dr. Foster used to say, there's something else other than the market involved when Junior says, pass the potatoes, Pop, and Pop passes the potatoes. You know, that's in a capitalist economy. Possibly that's where the potatoes comes from, but they don't have an economic transaction there at the dinner table. Now, somebody will say, well, yeah, but he's getting work out of the kids. Well, you haven't been around kids recently, if you think and even in the past, Ben Franklin's father, finally kicked him out of the house. And there are things that just aren't talked about in what's out there to try to be helpful to the startup. We're trying to fill the gap as far as business startups so that we can have more citizens that own their own business. Thomas Jefferson owned his own business. George Washington owned, Ben Franklin owned the founders of the country owned their own small business. Now, yes, you can say that I'm idealistic because the environment's changed, and it may be harder right now, at least temporarily. We think we can help address some of those concerns, though. And we're not anti-corporation at all if there's competition. But when things are done to not allow competition, they should be addressed. And the SBA is not doing that right now. And they take money from large corporations and then have these startup classes that they counted as a success. If somebody comes and says, ooh, I better just take a job, SBA counts that as a success. Well, it's almost 12:30. this has been a little bit different show. I hope you'll pass it on to anybody that you know that might like to take a version of what we're doing. We don't have this protected as intellectual property. If this just inspires you to get started in St. Louis this afternoon on your own, more power to you. Always welcoming phone calls. I'll give you my phone number now. This is my personal cell phone number. Call me if I can be of help to you in any way to start a similar effort in your city, your state, in your neighborhood. Number 720-495-4949. 720-495-4949. So I'm headed now to the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop. Lodo Tattered Cover, that'll start at 2 o'clock. Then Socrates Cafe this evening at 6 o'clock. Lodo Panera Bread, 16th and Market. Maybe I'll see you at one or both of those meetings, or maybe next week. But that's each Friday and tomorrow night and every Saturday at the University of Denver for Socrates Cafe with a focus on science. So until next week, this is John Wren at the Startup Show, reminding you and myself, this life is very, very short. Let's go get started. Thanks for watching.